is seeking to deliver SANG also. And within our plan, and I think the agreed statement's common ground, we are relying on TRO2 in the first instance, recognizing there's options, to be looking at delivery of the county council SANG. It's not to say that there's only one option here. I think what we're trying to say is that there's flexibility with regards to how much SANG and where those homes will be, where that mitigation will be secured through various schemes.
I think from my perspective, that's, I was going to say that's enough, but of course, out of fairness, Mr. Murphy, I think then we will no doubt come back to this, but yeah. But Mr. Murphy, let's hear from you first.
Thank you, sir. I was just going to reiterate the point that the council's made there that if you refer to document ED 39A, it actually explicitly refers to the use of TRO1 or TRO3 servicing the SANG requirements of TRO2. Thank you.
I think for the time being, thank you, Mr. Berkshaw. That's all I need to pursue is just to gauge where we're going after lunch.
No, that was really helpful, and thank you all for your contributions this morning and on previous days. I think, Mr. Bristow and I have heard a lot about the east of Tring site, and we've got it sort of firmly in our mind with regard to the evidence, the methodology, concerns about the methodology, and the sort of the rationale and reasoning. We'll break for lunch. We'll have an adjournment until 2 o'clock for lunch. And after lunch, we'll come back and just want to unpick the other sites in Tring, and then there's sort of time for any sort of summary or mopping up thereafter. So we will adjourn for lunch. But in terms of some of the detail around TRO3, that's sort of it for today, really, on that site, and we'll move on to the others. So we'll adjourn and resume at 2 o'clock, please.
I'm going. There. They should be on now, sir.
No, they don't have batteries in theirs, which is an omission.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I think we've got everybody. Everyone's microphones are working, so we'll resume and continue. So we started to discuss this before lunch. I said we'd obviously come back to it. So site TR02, as we have done with the other allocations, I think it would be helpful for the council and just the benefit of everybody here today, if you could just, again, as you have done for previous ones on previous days, just introduce the site, again, what the site boundary is based on, and any updates, if there's been any updates since submission of the local plan, and then if you think there's any changes that are needed, that would be a good starting point, please.
Forgive me, sir, is this TR02 now? Yes. Okay. So TR02 allocation New Mill, it's 14.7 hectares and the whole site is to be released from the Greenbelt. site boundary again, it's based on the land ownership promoted by Catesby Estates. Proposed for around 400 new homes and public open space. And then our plan, in terms of planning applications, there are no live application on this site, although I am aware there's now a screening opinion for EIA.
And just in terms of your position with site promoters, I believe it's a statement of common ground, August 25. Is there anything in there that we need to go to in terms of any sort of key areas of disagreement or any suggested changes that either party feel are necessary to the submitted plan?
That's correct. We do have a statement of common ground. It's DBCED 33. We have a number of points which we say we've resolved following the submission of the Dacorum local plan. I know the site promoter objected to the inclusion of a number of site requirements on the basis that they would be more succinctly dealt with through a validation checklist, but not in terms of having any kind of in principle objection to delivering them on site, as we considered that they were sound. I believe the only real outstanding matter between the parties is site-specific criteria on flood risk, surface water flood risk, where there's a requirement which was based on comments made by the lead local flood authority, Herts County Council, appreciate they're not here, to say that proposals should investigate design opportunities which have the potential to reduce the risk of surface water flooding off-site. So noting there's a surface flow path running through the centre of the site. If there's any design solution that could reduce that, site promoter considers that should be amended just to refer to on-site as opposed to off-site. But we noted in between paragraph 4.3 and 4.4 that we consider that to be sound and haven't suggested to delete it.
Good, that's working. Could you just bring me up to speed with the SANG situation here? Because I think this is common to, I was just trying to work out in my mind over lunch the relationship of the different suitable alternative natural green space provision, the James Farm SANG, which I understand is no longer in play. So just which is referenced in TRO2, TRO1, just in terms of how that mitigation in terms of impacts on Chiltern Beechwoods is going to take place. If you could just talk me through that, that'd be really useful. Thank you.
Sure. So following the submission of the local plan, site promoter of James Farm confirmed they're no longer exploring that as the preferred option. They're instead focusing on Cow Lane Farm Meadows wildlife site, and that was agreed between us, the council, and Hertfordshire County Council property within the Statement of Common Ground DBC ED 23. So we've suggested that the policy criteria is now amended rather than refer to James Farm to refer to the Cow Lane Farm Meadows SANG. But we do note that within the policy there is unless an alternative solution is identified and agreed, noting in paragraph 3.16 of the Statement of Common Ground that the site is located within the catchment of multiple proposed SANG sites, which could mitigate the impact of development. At the moment, we've identified Cow Lane Farm Meadows and have aligned the sites.
And can you just bring us up to speed with the status of the Cow Lane SANG?
No live application, although, and the site promoter's here, so they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that advice has been sought through Natural England to confirm this site's suitability as a SANG. We've agreed that within the Statement of Common Ground, but no live application at this stage.
Okay, thank you. And just one last point from me, and I don't know if Mr. Birkinshaw has any questions, or we're going to open up the debate. But just in terms of looking at TRO2, in terms of density, I suppose that same question, and this is maybe Mr. Murphy may want to come in, if you just purely run the numbers, I think you come out somewhere like 27 dwellings a hectare if you're looking around 400 across that site. Are you satisfied in terms of all the various requirements, the landscape considerations, design, biodiversity, flood risk, that that is an appropriate level of density?
We consider it to be an appropriate level of density. There's been no objection from the site promoter either on around 400, noting as well within our responses to the overarching questions, it is an around figure subject to master planning, so that does have some degree of flexibility when we get to the detailed master planning stages.
Mr. Murphy, thank you.
Thank you, sir. The only thing I was going to add on that is that, yeah, we are in the process of preparing a pre-application inquiry. And as part of that exercise, we are determining the level of development that could be accommodated on site. And we think for the time being, given the technical exercises that we have commissioned, that that's appropriate level. Thank you.
Just to be clear in terms of timing, because obviously we've got timescales here of delivery from 2027, 2028. You're preparing a pre-application inquiry at the moment.
Correct.
There will be a planning application. There'll be, it might be outlined, might be full, might be various discharges of condition, but you're sticking to delivery as you anticipate in 2027, 2028. I'm just being open. That seems optimistic, but feel free to tell me otherwise.
Optimistic, but we think it's achievable.
Sorry, sir, I'd just like to flag that within the statement of common ground, paragraph 3.11 and 3.12, because the site's currently tied to the TRO1 SANG solution, we've proposed to amend the kind of indicative guidance or timeline for the site within TRO2 to 28-29. However, we do agree that if the site promoter can identify and agree an alternative solution, the timeline could be accelerated.
And this all, I mean, we'll sort of come on to all this when we look, I think, holistically at delivery, anticipations for delivery, what that all means for the plan. So this is just so it's all clear for the notes, but I've got, I suppose, the position, Mr. Murphy, position of the council, various implications. We've talked about what, in previous sessions, what sites have to do to demonstrate whether they're deliverable or developable, and the clear evidence that's needed there. So, okay, that's everything I wanted to touch on for the time being. Thank you.
Yeah, it might be useful before we sort of open this up to hear representatives, if we could just go through the council's suggested changes to the local plans. It's probably, they're referred to in the statement of common ground, but I think they're also referred to in your hearing statements. So do you just want to take us through each one? And again, just why they're necessary for soundness, please?
Sure, so it's the table after paragraph 5.108 in the hearing statements. First change is suggested to Urban Design Principles 4. I mentioned this before lunch. Essentially, the proposed to remove that last part of the sentence reflects the fact that those facilities are planned on site TRO3. So it's an effectiveness point in this case. We're still ensuring that high quality green infrastructure and sustainable transport linkages are provided with the adjacent allocation. It's just the requirement to ensure those linkages connect to those facilities is now placed solely on TRO3 because that's where they're located. But obviously we do still require closely aligned master plans on these sites. The second suggested modification came from the Site Promoters Regulation 20 representations, which now essentially confirm the technical exercises on access, show that highway access could be provided by Bourbon Road and Grove Road, so 2 access points, whereas we had a point saying investigate secondary highway access onto Grove Road. So now that's been confirmed. We know that can have those 2 points, and it should be reflected in the policy. And then finally, contribute towards the Cow Lane Farm meadows, suitable alternative natural green space, unless an alternative solution, removing the reference to James Farm.
Nothing further from me, thank you.
And then just take it back, Mr. Smith, if you will, to the area of disagreement that you still have with the council, and any further main modifications that you feel are necessary, and again, the reasons why in the sort of terms of soundness.
Thank you, sir. In terms of what we've already addressed through the hearing statements, and it's already discussed by the council, the two main issues that we had, the allocation as it was presented was just in terms of requiring those off-site surface water improvements to be delivered as a result of the development of our site. And then turning to the more general kind of requirements of the policy in terms of certain documents have to be provided in support of the application itself. We just feel like that's going to be duplication with an inevitable validation checklist. So why does it necessarily need to form part of the policy itself? Those are the two main points. Thank you.
We'll deal with the second one first. So just in terms of the sort of validation requirement point, I did raise this yesterday with the council in terms of other site allocations, where there were various things which were simply asking for a document. Said, look, that's not the purpose of the local plan. Is there any that you want me to particularly look at? I did task the council with a sort of sense checks. They're probably doing this anyway. But was there any in particular that you had a concern over?
Thank you, sir. In terms of it, it mainly goes back to the point of duplication, as I said. We don't have any in principle issues with anything that's been identified within the list of documents that are required. It's just things that you'd be well aware that it would have to support any application, like a flood risk assessment, an ecological impact assessment. Every application for development, 99% of applications would have to be required to provide those documents in support. So, as I said, it's not an in principle. We've got concern with the list of documents that have been requested. It's just, I think if they're applicable, specifically applicable to the site, more than happy to provide them, and they should form part of the policy. But if they're more general requirements, we don't think it should be contained within the policy.
And then turning to the first point you raised, this issue of the off-site. So this is under flood risk and drainage criterion 3, is it? In the submitted plan?
That's correct.
Yeah. And from Catesby's point of view then, why is this unsound, and what should the remedy be?
Thank you, sir. We considered it unsound just because it related to off-site works, off-site improvements that weren't directly applicable to the proposed development itself, in accordance with Regulation 122 of the soil regulations. So in terms of making the policy sound, we would suggest that that requirement is removed.
I think where so speak to Mr. Bristol about this, where I see a concern with it, this is an issue that crops up in a few different places. It's going back to that thing we talked about yesterday about what is it that the council require, because here we've got proposals should investigate design opportunities which have the potential to reduce the risk of surface water flooding off-site. It's very, very broad, and it's, I'd say, borderline ambiguous and thus not effective. Again, if there's a specific harm that's occurring and you need something to mitigate it, fine, set out in your local plan. If it's not, then it's, as a decision maker, I'm not really sure what you're asking the developer to do that? And if they don't do it, where's the conflict?
Happy to take that away. I think the requirements actually came through the development of the IDP. Lead Local Flood Authority identified that the surface water flow path is east to west through this site. It's previously affected properties within the area. So they said it may be possible to implement a design on site that would reduce this risk, but more than happy to take it away to determine if there's a specific ask from the Lead Local Flood Authority to strengthen that requirement. But they do, we consider that reducing flood risk in surrounding areas also isn't fundamentally unsound, but take the point.
Yeah, I do sort of tend to agree with sort of KSP in this position. It's what are you trying to reduce? It's still quite ambiguous. Reduce in what way? Who's measuring that? Where is it reducing the flood risk? Is it a particular street, particular property, a particular part? It becomes quite difficult, I think, for a developer to really sort of hone in on what you need. And again, where you've got, should investigate, it goes back to that sort of case yesterday about, well, we investigated it and we couldn't do anything. Well, you meet the policy, so it's almost a bit, it's not actually getting to what you need to do. So I think have a bit of a sense check of that. I probably do err on the side of Kate's view. I think there's too much ambiguity there, and it's falling into sort of ineffective territory. Mr. Bristow, any comments on that?
No, none of that agreed, though.
Mr. Murphy, was there anything else then in terms of the requirements? Obviously, we talked about some of which the council have put forward as necessary before sort of open this site up to discussion. Was there anything else within the policy itself you feel needs changing at all? No? No? Okay, any views on this site then? Anything we've heard or any different views? Yeah, Mr. Gardner?
Thank you again. It repeats my point really from beforehand on water scarcity. ED 39 RAG rates TR2 as green for water and green for waste, but TR1 and TR3 are both amber. It's all Tring. They've all got the same issues. It will be an impact on delivery dates. So I'd certainly, from my point of view, it sounds very ambitious, the delivery dates that are being put forward for this specific site. But soon, yeah, well, Thames Water will tell you where you're going to get your water supply. That's the comment for me.
Give me, I'm just finding my page. So just regarding the water and wastewater rating first from the purposes of ED 39, the comments were taken through Thames Water's May 2024 representations as part of the development of the infrastructure delivery plan. We've taken the fact that they said, based on the information available, they didn't envisage concerns regarding the capacity. I note that within their regulation 20 representations, that they also haven't raised concerns in regarding to Thames Water regarding to waste. Water supply was highlighted as red within their RAG assessment, but this reflects their position set out within 2020, and we have measures within our infrastructure delivery plan to respond to this as well. So I didn't give page references, but it's 127 and 128 CD ED 39.
So what are
I need the document reference unless Ronan's got it open. Infrastructure delivery plan on water. Got IDV 02.2. And it's Actually, development will require upgrades to the network. Planning for water supply infrastructure is carried out at a strategic level. They have a number of reinforcement schemes in the pipeline. They say there'll be an ongoing requirement to carry out reinforcements due to the existing infrastructure. So this sets out potable water and wastewater and sets out the responsible authority. So it's all within the schedule. And then Ronan's got something.
Yes, sir, if I may, and it's a slightly more broad point, and it's hopefully helpful to the conversation, because this does appear to keep coming up, and you made reference previously in hearing sessions earlier this week to, obviously there's a duty on through, I think, section 106 of the Water Industry Act for the, you know, for people to connect. So there's people have the right to connect to the network, and that's primary legislation. We can't do, you know, everything sits underneath that. When it comes to the water and wastewater infrastructure bodies, it's important to note that while we have plans, they too have their own plans, and drainage and wastewater management plans is something that, as well as water resource management plans, are expectations on the water infrastructure bodies to prepare, to take account of growth that looks beyond our plan periods. I think it goes up to 2055, the DWMP, the Drainage Wastewater Management Plan. That is where they plan for their infrastructure upgrades, taking account of what is emerging, both in terms of local plans, but also in terms of allocations. And with regards to this, I think there's a secondary point that's quite important, is that the infrastructure network and the ability to plan for that is obviously being a little bit, you know, speculative for quite a few years here. It's not being plan-led because we haven't had a plan that's up to date, that is able to look forward over the next 15 years and to have control. So in light of that, you know, they've had to be dealing for a number of years in light of speculative developments principally, but also in the proper functioning of the network too. I think it is possibly a bit premature for them to be saying we're committing millions of pounds to upgrades, when the discussions today are about whether the sites are sound or not, and the extent of outstanding objections means it's very, very challenging for those bodies to absolutely commit to saying we are going to absolutely upgrade to deliver, you know, upgrades to meet what the plan is doing, because there's a lot of outstanding objections. And as a consequence of that, if they were to seek to put that much forward now, and for you, sirs, to decide that perhaps the strategy should change, either here or elsewhere in the borough, then what they deliver on the ground might be ineffective in another way, i.e. they've over-delivered capacity, which that too has a problem and consequence in terms of slower flows, inadequate flows in the network, in terms of the capacity and the money. And I think those are important points to take into account in terms of where we are today in the discussions today with regards to the level of outstanding objections for growth. We feel we are comfortable, and we have engaged with the providers, and they've told us if you are going to have these, infrastructure requirements are necessary, but we are still in the absence of an up-to-date plan. And with that, you know, how much certainty can they commit right now today to saying that we will absolutely deliver every single one of these infrastructure upgrades, and we should start planning for that 2 years ago? So I hope that's helpful additional scene setting on that. I think it's an important point. Thank you.
I'm really sorry, I've just got one more just to flag, because I've realised I didn't make it too clear that a red RAG rating isn't a fundamental constraint being raised by the water undertaker. It's them saying on the information provided, modelling will be required, and it's anticipated that upgrades to the network will be necessary. So it's not them saying that there's a fundamental capacity issue that means development can't happen. It just means that, as Ronan said, that modelling will be required, and they anticipate that the upgrades will be needed once that's undertaken. Modelling takes place once there's planning approval.
I think where it goes in my mind is the trajectory. I'm probably looking at Mr. Murphy here. So just to be clear then, Mr. Murphy, what's your view? Because I'm looking at the statement of common ground from August 25. So what's your position on when delivery would occur here? Because I think in that statement of common ground, you've got 50 dwellings in 28, 29. So just remind me, what's your position on delivery here?
Thank you, sir. So I said earlier that we were confident that we were able to deliver, I think from what was stated within the allocation itself, which is 27 to 28, but following discussions with the council, it might be more realistic to delay that slightly to 28 to 29 for a delivery to start from. What we're able to do as part of the pre-application process is engage with any statutory undertakers to determine what specific modelling is required at this point in time to help demonstrate the deliverability of the site come the planning application stage. But I just referred to the council's substantial discussion there regarding we need a local plan in place to inform capacity in the future, and it's essentially a chicken and egg situation. So going back to the delivery schedule, we see no reason why we can't meet those meet that identified trajectory, obviously subject to having those additional conversations with the statutory undertakers.
I mean, Mr. Bristow described it as optimistic. I'd probably go a bit further. I think you don't have planning permission. You don't even have a planning application. Presumably you would, and it refers to the process of the local plan, alteration, agreement boundaries, etc., etc. The Catesby build homes, or would you be looking to sell it? What's your client's position?
It would likely be sold.
So I think, without being blunt, or being blunt maybe, any delivery in 2027 is wholly unrealistic. You haven't got a plan application in. You're going to have to you've said you're going to put an outline in. There's then legal agreements, conditions, potential sale of the land to a house builder. They'll then come forward with their own reserve matters. You then got to build them, sell them, and occupy them.
And just while we're piling in on you, the other thing that I'm still trying to grapple with is the dependency of TRO2 on other sites or schools in particular. So there will come a threshold at a certain point where, if your site is to be developed, there will be the requirement to use infrastructure that isn't there at the moment. So that's another point, I think. And sorry, but I entirely see where you're going.
I think it's obviously it's the council's plan, and I appreciate that you site promoters has been integral to some of this data, but we do have a session on 5-year supply and housing land supply. I would very carefully go away and look at that, because I think it's just not, we're already in March 2026, and to suggest that people are going to be living in 50 dwellings in the next 12 months is not going to happen. So I think you need to go really, really carefully look at that trajectory, and it's really important because it does feed into the topic around 5-year housing land supply. Any other, Mr. Gardner? And it goes back to the point that's been raised about, such things as infrastructure capacity, things need upgrading. These are all considerations which obviously the council has said, big strategic considerations. We don't know the detail yet. It's for a local plan to be adopted, and we'll work from that basis. But again, it does go to the sort of heart of deliverability and developability. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you. Where was I? So Thames Water are consistent across the whole borough with regard to treatment of wastewater. They're consistent on their RAG rating. It's something I personally think is a bit ambitious, but they're consistent, so no criticism of Dacorum at all on that. But when it comes to potable water, Tring is a bit of a standalone in the fact it has Thames Water as the water provider. All the rest of the council is provided by Affinity. Affinity are already implementing upgrades on their boosting water supply in through Bovingdon and up to Berkhamsted. So that's physically being implemented as we speak. Thames Water are the ones that are absolutely stuck because they're reliant on HS2 and it comes through from Aylesbury Vale and they have no commitment from HS2 on timing at all. So that's my clarification on there.
Not from me, thank you.
Thank you, sir. The only thing I was going to say is in terms of, ultimately, I do agree with your assessment as to whether when these dwellings are going to be built, occupied, habitable, and hence we've included that within the statement of common ground with the council. So 2028, 2029, we think that's realistically when development can start. But if it starts earlier, it's obviously to the benefit of the council's housing land supply, etc. Thank you.
It falls into the classic territory of, and it's not criticism, but the classic territory of, yes, of course, we'll build them all within 2 or 3 years that you hear in local planning examinations, and then you hear the exact opposite in the Section 78 inquiry later on, where they say, no, you're never going to build these houses. I think the key for us is a real important test of realism around these, because it is important. It goes to whether the whole plan, if you can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, whether or not the plan is effective. It's really important we get these figures. Yeah, it is an estimation, I appreciate that, but they need to be robust. Okay, let's move on. Yep.
Yep.
TR0 goes on. Do people want a quick break, or do people want to carry on? Obviously, if people aren't here, as we said before, for sites, they can feel free to sort of shuffle papers and exit, but happy for you to stay equally. Yeah, okay, we'll carry on. TR01 then, same question for the council. So just by way of introduction, sort of context, background, where we've got to, sort of reasons for the site allocation, and if there's been any change in circumstances since submission of the plan, and or any modifications that you think are needed, please.
Doing a bit of a shuffle of virtual paper at the moment, just waiting for some documents to open. So, TR01, Dunsley Farm. It's a 37.25 hectare site. We've got proposed around 21 hectares of land to be retained in the green belt within the red line boundary. The site's being promoted by Hertfordshire County Council property. It's allocated for around 250 new homes. A general employment area currently in the plan, 3.6, but there's an agreement within our statement of common ground. I believe I've already referred to it, but I will again, ED 23. Just around 3 hectares of employment land, new primary school, and again, a proposal now to provide suitable alternative natural green space on the Cow Lane Farm Meadows wildlife site. So submitted plan CDO1 says that it will deliver enhancements to the Cow Lane Farm Meadows wildlife site, and then the SANG mitigation will be delivered off-site at James Farm. Now proposed that that's changed. No live application on this site, change in the planning status at this time.
And our understanding of this site, this relates to a greenbelt site, TRA5, as in the Greenbelt Part 2, which was identified as moderately contributing to the Greenbelt as opposed to others that we have discussed. In terms of landscape sensitivity, obviously well aware of the boundary of the National Landscape AONB. And does anyone have any comments on that? And as I understand it, this is something this is an allocation that obviously from Herts County Council property. This is a proposal that is supported by the Grovefields Residents Association, which is also supported by the Sports Forum in terms of the provision in that respect. No? I was hearing some, yeah, I was seeing some interesting chat out there. Oak, Mr. Wallace.
Yeah, sorry. No, we have been campaigning for many years to have this land here, which is Cow Lane Meadows, as described, for which is Cow Lane Farm in effect, for sports land for Tring. The big sticking point has been there has been it is since 1997 it's been a local wildlife site, and Dacorum, somewhat understandably, have been reluctant to talk about any sport going on to that site because it's, their attitude, I think, Ronan will back me up, is that, it is down to Hertfordshire County Council. But we do feel that this gets bandied backwards and forwards between Hertfordshire County Council and Dacorum. We've been trying since 2020, we actually had a meeting lined up just before COVID to actually, with the Hertfordshire County Council and Dacorum planners. It was cancelled by Hertfordshire County Council, and now people are refusing to meet us all sitting around the table. This can be resolved. There is a resolution here. It is the only site in Tring that will actually satisfy all the statements in the draft local plan about the providing infrastructure and healthy living, etc., of which there are numerous right the way through the plan. And because Tring is proud of the fact that it has its sporting community is very, very close, and that site would actually help link the sporting sites together. And it would be a truly wonderful thing for the town. And we now, our colleagues at Dacorum Sports Network have commissioned a Wildlife and Sport in Harmony, it's called, report, which was recommended actually by the planners from Dacorum that should be carried out. And two of the clubs, Tring Tornadoes and Tring Rugby Club, which are the two biggest land-using sports clubs in Tring, got together with these people, natural asset partners, and produced this plan, which actually shows, if it's right, although it's subject to further checks in this spring and summer, that biodiversity-wise, the actual biodiversity of that site could be increased while providing roughly 2/3 of the site for sporting use or general open space. So, I mean, it would absolutely kill all the dreams of Dacorum in their draft local plan if we can't get that site. The cricket club, tennis club, hockey club, Tring Tornadoes, Tring Rugby Club, bowls club, squash club, all need to expand. That we're bulging at the seams. There hasn't been a report updated on the playing field strategy since 2023. We have got to actually we have all got to get round the table and sort this out.
That's very clear, and thank you for setting out some of the history. In terms of the allocation, obviously there's been a process of discussion. I'm not sure how you have been involved in that, but there's been a process of discussion between the County Council and the Borough Council, which has resulted in the allocation TRO1, which does, through its criteria, consider the sort of balance, if you like, between different competing interests in the land, different competing functions. In your view, does TRO1, does Dunsley Farm, does that allocation achieve what you want it to achieve, or are you suggesting there should be modifications to it, or is what you were saying just more an endorsement of please get on with allocating it?
Well, the Dunsley Farm end of TRO1, which is the development end, that needs to be modified slightly to accommodate some quite small amount of expansion for the cricket club, tennis club and hockey club, all of which need new land. Now, but not much compared to Tring Tornadoes and Tring Rugby Club. You know, lots of factors have caused this, but we will have to make changes to the layout of TRO1 to accommodate all the sporting needs, which I think are vital for the town.
Thank you. That's clear. Let's turn to the councils. If you like.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to, there we go, microphone. We're going to go 4 points on this one at the moment. So, as mentioned, this site contains an area of land to be retained within the Greenbelt. A considerable portion of that is designated as a Cow Lane Farm Meadows wildlife site. Within their responses to the matters issues questions, question 2 for TRO1, I've included kind of boundary area map after paragraph 5.118. Which kind of sets out the extent of this. So, second point is that Hertfordshire County Council Ecology responded to the emerging strategy for growth back when this allocation, the whole red line was proposed for the development of 400 homes, and confirmed that the development of that would be a fundamental, that wildlife site would be a fundamental ecological constraint. It had a high sensitivity. And as part of that representation, which I can provide a full reference to if you wish, said that the local wildlife site was designated for its neutral grassland habitat and noted that this, such places like this, habitats like this are now threatened. Over 95% of lowland grasslands have been lost since World War II, and this site represents a rare remaining example. So it's just noting as well that it's not just necessarily delivering net gain, but the habitat that's on the site currently, according to the lead ecologist, the lead ecology authority, should be retained. We responded to this by essentially proposing that the wildlife site should be retained and enhanced prior to it being allocated for SAG. Third point is that we responded in our Regulation 22 statements to the comments made by Dacorum Sports Network, Tring Sports Forum in Appendix B, so that's CD 10.2, noting that no further evidence had been presented to Hertfordshire County Council to de-designate this as a wildlife site. And then finally, we consider that now the Cow Lane Farm Meadows wildlife site is being promoted as SANG, and have agreed a proposed modification. We think that this would be an appropriate, more appropriate use for this site.
I'm slightly struggling, and this is maybe that's something that's fallen between the gaps of the representation. As I saw it, well, I mean, maybe the Grovefield Residents Association, can I just double check your position? Because actually what I'm getting is very different from what I read from what I thought I read from the sports forum. So, yeah.
First of all, we support the allocation. Secondly, we think it has potential to be significantly more intense. For example, things like the primary school, we're not really understanding why that can't the school itself be on the edge of the green belt, and the fields spread, the fields for the primary school being in the green belt. That sort of point. And so if you look at the total figures, I think it's come out at about 27 per hectare, I think, here as well. And it's just too low. Inefficient use of land, too low, not maximising the opportunity. And in terms of, if you go to a comparative study vis-a-vis green belt scores and NLAA scores, it's clearly a place that should be appropriately densely developed, or at least to the edge of the modified green belt.
Thank you. And I'm still, I don't know if I'm making too much of a meal of this, but I'm still not quite getting the perspective of the forum relative to the perspective of the council. I suppose it comes down to, I mean, I've been around that area. I've walked around. I'm not going to tell you if I've been to the brewery, but there are various sporting uses, and it seems to be the sports forum support for the principle of the allocation. It seems to be the council are supportive of an allocation, but not to the extent of what the sports forum wants. So I'm just confused as to what is going on. Surely, given it's a mixed use allocation, subject to master planning, and it comes back to a point Mr. Birkinshaw made, there could be some form of accommodation that talks about potential mixed use site taking account of neighbouring uses. And I haven't seen anything that says fundamentally all uses, all surrounding interests could not be accommodated here. And indeed, we're hearing from the Grovefield Residents Association that it could be more intensively developed in any event. So I'm just struggling to understand what is the request in terms of a main modification here. What is the issue that we need to unpick?
Thank you, sir. I'll try and keep it as simple as I can. So if we can just obviously look at the map in our plan on page 161, TR01 Dudley Farm. And we'll just say it's in essence split in half. One half to be released from the greenbelt on the west, and one half to be retained in the greenbelt on the east. So as it stands, that land identified in green to be retained in the greenbelt, it's the council's position that that should now be delivered and secured as a SANG, suitable alternative natural green space. That's reflective of what Ms. Mitchell said has been agreed with the county council, and reflects the county council's intentions that James Farm, which is to the northwest of Tring, should no longer be considered as a SANG. They instead want to look and secure a SANG on that land identified green. Now that is immediately adjacent to the new homes, new communities to be delivered on Dunsley Farm, on the homes to the west of the allocation, on the western half of the allocation, I should say. Where we have disagreement is to the east of that, is that Tring Sports Forum want to use that land in green for sports provision instead of a SANG, which is natural green space versus sports facility, and they're not compatible. And in essence, there's a conflict there. We do recognize and we do understand that to the east of this allocation, when you go across the road, you'll see that there's existing sports facilities on Cow Lane itself, which is east of the red line boundary. And we recognize and understand the long-term discussions that have been going on about the aspirations for this site. And we recognize that there has been discussions since before COVID on, the aspirations for that. But naturally, taking into account changes in circumstances, i.e. the need for mitigation to be secured, that following the publication of that evidence in 2022, we now needed to identify and secure SANG alongside homes. So cutting it to short, if we were to lose the SANG on that site, and in theory in the absence of any alternative SANG solution, we therefore lose any potential residential homes on that site, which are tied to that SANG.
Indeed, yes, I see then, but as I have it, the SANG has, and sorry, I'm going to be perhaps more blunt than I've been previously, surely there's some kind of accommodation that could be made. I'm just thinking, given we've been told the site could intensify by the Grovefields Residents Association, surely there's something that could be done. It's maybe not a matter of soundness, but I'm just saying in terms of practicality. As I have it, the SANG is important, obviously, for well-known reasons, but it is also in that location because it is coterminous with priority habitat that Natural England have advised. Is it entirely coterminous with the priority habitat or not? So is effectively that bit of retained greenbelt entirely coterminous with priority habitat? Do we know?
No, it's not. So paragraph 5.118, it's a response to question 2, TR01 hearing statement. I've included a map which shows the area of the wildlife site. It's a hatched area.
But could you just take me to that?
Yep.
Sorry,
So
you're referring to a map.
So it's the matter, oh, sorry.
Right, well, there we are, aren't we? Because if my reading of this, which, thank you, Mr. Birkinshaw, has just passed me, it's not coterminous. There are two areas that are not within the local wildlife site, a rectangular area and a trapezoid area to the southwest. Does the SANG necessarily have to be of exactly that size? Is there not provision that could be made to accommodate sports uses there without effects to ecology? Have you explored those issues?
I note that the Natural England requirement for a SANG 2.3 kilometre walk would require the full use of the site to deliver those requirements. There's also, I guess there's consideration to be taken on what sports uses would be provided, the level of kind of artificial lighting, noise, etc. SANGs have to have a natural feel also.
The only reason that I'm pressing this is that this seems to be relatively unique in terms of being a site that everyone is agreed on as a mixed-use site. Surely something could be done to come to accommodation, or else we can take the views of Tring Sports Forum and your views and work out whether it's appropriate and it's justified in light of what we've heard. Surely there must be something that can be done to accommodate that. I'm just thinking.
Could I comment there, please?
Yes.
Tring Town Council in February last year passed a resolution that they support that site for sport for Tring. They know, the townspeople know, we carried out surveys and everything. Everybody knows that site, Hertfordshire County Council are trying to keep it back for future development. They recently had permitted development for some barn conversions, which look as though they're now going to be pulled down and houses built there, right in the middle of where we want to expand. They accidentally, on purpose, I feel, put a red line all the way around the nearest field to the sports clubs. That's the reason that they want to hang on to that land. If it was a SANG, they would never be able to develop it, well, not for 80 years anyway. And anyway, it is not big enough to be a SANG. You have to have 2.3 kilometres of pathway around the edge of it, according to Dacorum's own local plan. I just don't see why we can't sit round and sort this out. If Dunsley Farm have to have another SANG because they can't get James's Farm released, well, they've got to find another SANG. Otherwise, it just makes the whole plan unsound, frankly, because Dacorum are not able to produce all the things right the way through the plan that they say needs this kind of infrastructure, how they will encourage sport, healthy living, green spaces, and wildlife preservation, etc.
Let's hear, if we want, we can hear, because it's entirely, I think I'm right in saying, county council owned site.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, correct. It's entirely in Arts County Council ownership. I mean, I think first and the point that you make is that I think all parties are agreed it's an appropriate site, sustainable site. I think the question, as you say, comes from the mixed use and the appropriate allocations of the site. The policy as it is sound. We've had those discussions with Natural England, and that SANG provision, the site can, in essence, wash itself in terms of the SANG provision, which is, I think, entirely appropriate. The matter of the leisure provision is obviously one for the Borough Council to decide whether that forms part of the other mixed uses. The other point I think is worth adding on that is that obviously the area to the east of the site is existing employment use, and that will obviously is another important provision which has to be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Back to the council. I think I've heard what I need to on this. I don't know if Mr. Birkinshaw. Oh, I'm sorry. So over to the council, then I'll come to you. Yeah.
Thank you, sirs. Very little more to add to this conversation. As I said, as officers, we've had to go on the evidence available in front of us. All of the evidence objectively is, in light of that, we have to take into consideration, as Ms. Mitchell said, it is an identified, recognised and designated local wildlife site, and there is importance in that. The loss of that has to be, any potential loss of that has to be taken in the context of what any alternative provision may deliver. As I said, we have had to balance this one. There's a few kind of notable points I probably would add, if I may. The first point I think is it may be worth, in taking away, having a look again at what Tring Sports Forum's representation was at the Regulation 20 representations. It's ID 865. I believe that included a map of what their hope and intention was for that land. Again, I believe that's the reference. I was just checking it before you came to me. And it's probably worth considering their aspirations for this site. It does include, I think at times, not just the land identified for SANG, but also some of the land that's proposed to be released from the Greenbelt for some sports provision. And from what I recall, as part of the narrative discussion for that, they had sought to say that some of the homes could be moved to other land around Tring, not currently allocated. So it's my kind of overarching kind of view is that it's probably worthwhile before you come to a final view on this to have give particular regard to their views and what they think is it may look like what they're seeking to deliver on that site. The final point I've got is thinking about this holistically and appreciate the long-standing discussions that have been going on this and in light of everything I've said. But we do seek to, and be clear that TRO 3, which is delivering 1,400 homes on land to be released from the Greenbelt, does include a centre and the expectation that that would deliver sports provision. Notwithstanding the fact that I think that the expectation or request is that it's going beyond maybe the requirements that the plan is seeking to deliver, and we do recognise there are needs that need to be addressed, and we do want to keep those conversations going. Professionally, I think I would struggle to say right now, I can see an avenue that suggests that any of that land identified to be retained in the Greenbelt at TR01 could feasibly work alongside a SANG, as well as all the other development requirements for that allocation. Thank you.
Just in terms of, there's various suggested modifications to the sites around Tring, and a lot of them relate to the provision of SANG and the sort of the change in approach from the submitted plan. What's Natural England's position on these suggested changes?
I believe our counterparts at the County Council has confirmed that they had engaged directly with them on that SANG. and Natural England were comfortable that it could be identified as sang. I did speak directly with Natural England on this particular point following that feedback and just said, are you sure on this? And as a sort of sense check before we commit to anything within the statement of common ground, because equally we have to take account of their advice to those changes. And with that, they provided us, again, comfort and confidence that, you know, they recognize that it is immediately adjacent to where the homes are intended to go, rather than something that is to the northwest of Tring, in a more remote location, distant from existing settlements, which is where James Farm was. So on the basis of that, and it's intended to capture those and the impacts of growth from new communities and new homes, that sang, and given its, you know, the relationship of that open space and wildlife site immediately to the east, and our expectation that we can keep that, you know, protected in perpetuity, we felt that is, in our opinion, an appropriate outcome.
But presumably that discussion with Natural England was just, and again, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, presumably that was just in relation to TR01. So what's their position? Because we've talked about some suggested necessary main modifications in relation to other sites in Tring. So what's their sort of position on those changes as a whole, from a sort of local plan perspective, looking at the sites in Tring and how SANG will be delivered? Have they been approached?
Okay, thank you. If I can, being very clear. So with Tring, we have 3 proposed allocations. TR01 is seeking to deliver SANG to meet its needs and would likely have some excess capacity.
Yes, and that was a point I was going to come to. So it's likely to have some excess capacity, because I think that was one of the suggested benefits, that it could unlock or provide SANG capacity for development elsewhere, and that's where I'm still a little bit confused, but keep going.
Yeah, so TR01 is owners seeking to deliver homes, has to support that. Is seeking to allocate its own SANG to meet the 1,400 homes. And then we have TR02, which we just discussed after lunch, which does not have its own SANG, currently secured, but has the benefit of capacity from either of those 2 options. At TR01, the surplus capacity of the surplus capacity from either TR01 SANG or TR03 SANG to serve it.
So what's, because in the submitted plan, and again, just apologies if we've not got this clear, but it's an important point. So in the submitted plan, TR02, what was its SANG requirements? This would still contribute towards James Farm, wasn't it? Yeah? Right. So Natural England have obviously been engaged in the plan, and that's their understanding of what this local plan's doing. Things have now moved forward, as you've just explained. So what's their view on that? So what's their view on, obviously we've heard sort of indirectly a bit of a conversation with the county council, and we've not seen this, but it sounds like they're happy with it. TR03 slightly different. TR02 then, what's their view on what would be a main modification to have a different SANG strategy? Do we have their views anywhere?
So the overall SANG strategy for the borough as a whole, again, including Tring. So the original evidence position is appended to our habitats regulations assessment. That takes everything up to the point, including James Farm within it. And then since then, and through that following Reg 19, County Council had said, we are no longer pursuing James Farm. Would like to pursue this land within TR01. They engaged with Natural England, said they were comfortable. We spoke to Natural England separately. They told us they were comfortable. We, as the competent authority, who are ultimately responsible for the decisions on this, feel that meets the requirements of the Habitats Regulations Assessment, and that is where we feel the modification is necessary.
What I don't want to be a situation of is for Tring, the SANG strategy as a settlement has changed from that which has been submitted and that which Natural England have assessed this local plan against. What we don't have, and correct me if I'm wrong, what we don't have is anything from Natural England to suggest that actually, A, the SANG strategy for TRO1 is acceptable. Appreciate that you've spoken to them, but we haven't. We've not seen anything. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. So we don't know that that's appropriate. And secondly, we don't know what their views are on the sort of deletion of the James Farm SANG and use of some spare capacity at TRO1 to satisfy the requirements of TRO2. Does that make sense? We got that right?
So within the statement of common ground between us and Hertfordshire County Council property D23, let me find it. So it's paragraph 3.28, which that's where it confirms that the site promoter has engaged with Natural England on the discretionary advice service. They've advised that the Cow Lane Farm Meadows would be acceptable in principle. Naturally, they say subject to further technical work for TRO1, but then for the modification for TRO2, we've added, well, it's already included, essentially to say unless an alternative solution is identified and agreed with Natural England. So at the moment, we can have the spare capacity for that within Cow Lane Farm Meadows. Alternatively, there's spare capacity at TRO3 or in notes within the statement of common ground for between us and Catesby Estates, that the site is also within the catchment area, including the Hill Farm Gateway, which is in the plan too. So there's multiple solutions which could meet TRO2.
I think before this goes any further, you need to get something in writing from Natural England. Because if we proceeded on this basis and it went to a main modification consultation, and Natural England turned around and said, hang on a minute, that's not an effective strategy, you can't provide mitigation, TRO1 and TRO2 ultimately that they're ineffective.
I'm very comfortable to take that away and happy to seek some form of confirmation either by email or statement of common ground with them, short one.
Thank you. I think that's helpful and was probably phrased much more eloquently than my floundering around to try and work out how they all related to each other. But I'm very conscious Mr. Gardner has been waiting patiently. So hear from Mr. Gardner, I think, then Mr. Thompson, and see where that leaves us. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, SANGs are moving quite constantly. They follow along. Every planning application needs to have a SANG. I should say in a recent live application, but I haven't got the reference, in Berkhamsted, it's actually nominating a SANG in Tring at Penley Farm. So it's a document that's in there. It might not be finalised and approved by Natural England, but they're proposing a SANG there. So that would then geographically fit very well for Dunsey Farm TR1. In fact, it'd be much nearer there than it would be Berkhamsted. And the super SANG that seems to be not, for whatever reason, considered is Pitstone Quarry, which crosses the border between Bucks and Herts. Is only less than a mile away from TR3. It will on its own cover over 2,000 houses. It's a very large SANG, but being dealt with by Bucks and Herts because it's mineral and waste, not being dealt through the normal council. And that's been going for about a year and a bit. And the SANG side of it is not under question. The question is potential contamination of the underlying aquifer, and that's what's delaying the consent on that. But it's all that's moving forward.
Well, I think your point about things moving quite a bit is something that Mr. Birkinshaw and the council are aware of in terms of getting Natural England's perspective. So I think that's useful. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, sir. I put my card up originally in response to the question about did anybody in the room have anything to say about landscape on the TR01, and I was just going to confirm that we are happy with the impact on the Chilterns National Landscape, basically because that the buffer that's proposed and the existing development around the site and the junction. But I wonder it might also be helpful on the Sang thing, just in advance of getting a formal statement from Natural England. That my understanding is that the kind of minimum size for a Sang to accommodate that 2.3 to 2.5 kilometre circular route is generally considered to be around 10 hectares. I think we need slightly more than 10 hectares for the two developments we're talking about here, probably about 13 to 15 hectares, but that's just a ballpark sort of figure, if that's any help.
Thank you. Any comments from the council?
Having been involved and led on the mitigation strategy for the council on this a few years ago, rule of thumb is the optimum for a good, decent footpath. Let's just keep it simple, and that isn't too close to the edges of a site and doesn't get too close or cross itself, is around about 20 hectares for a decent Sang. It can be smaller, is the short answer. It can be smaller, but you do add complexities, and then you do have to consider landscaping, trying to make the paths look like they're more distant than they actually are, and so that people aren't resulting or choosing shorter walks. But it's probably an area of complexity we don't want to get into in too much detail. We have a separate session on Sangs. I think the important thing to note just on that, and some of the others are on the table and maybe were on yesterday, having control over the delivery of Sang alongside homes is an advantage. So a single landowner that can deliver a Sang alongside homes, as we have at Shendish, as we have at Polehanger, is an advantage, as we have with North Hemel. Delivering the Sang alongside it gives certainty about that mitigation, rather than relying on a third party to deliver that Sang, unless it is, of course, us, the council, and we have Sang readily available. But that's just a note. And I think a second point is Pitstone Quarry. I was involved in site visits on that. I don't think the Sang element is necessarily a done deal. I was part of site visits with Natural England on that one. We do have concerns over the fact that it is intended to be used and continue to remain in operation on part of that site as a quarry or as a place for waste. And there'll be a lot of heavy traffic through that site on a daily basis. We had given our reservations to its ability to function as a Sang in the short term. But notwithstanding that, we're always wanting to look and help and explore solutions to ensure we do have a really strong Sang strategy. As I said, for Tring, Dacorum's in a more challenging place than, say, Hemel, where we have our own Sang solutions, we have our own land and ability to serve growth there. When it comes to Tring, we have to rely on solutions that are not the council's. And with that, we have to treat that with a little degree of caution when it comes to the deliverability of sites, as well as the developability of sites. Thank you.
Thank you. And are we going to hear from, on behalf of Redrow, in terms of what the volume of the Sang is that you're proposing, in terms of what relates to 1,400 relative to what is the spare capacity? I thought that was potentially why your nameplate was up, but it may be another point.
No, it's not, strictly speaking. No, ours is 27 plus 10 supplemental. The point I wanted to raise was simply about Pitstone Quarry. If you measure the distance between any houses on the eastern edge of Tring and to walk to Pitstone Quarry to use it as Sang, it's nearly an hour walk. So what we're trying to do here, and the preferred solution, is to enable people to get access to Sang so that they're not having to put pressure on the beachheads.
I take those points. I'm not sure if the council wants to say anything on this. Yes, Mr. Wright.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, I just thought it'd be worthwhile just clarifying for yourselves and for the benefit of this hearing today. Obviously, we have had those discussions with Natural England, and we can confirm that the Sang proposed and the plan which has been submitted to the council, to yourselves, is in full agreement with Natural England, and indeed as advised by them. But I appreciate you'll need confirmation of that, and obviously we will provide that confirmation for you both and for the council. The second point, and my final point, was just to confirm what the councillor said in terms of ensuring the deliverability of the site in terms of having that sign in our control in a single ownership, I think is important and is an important factor for the site as a whole to ensure that is delivered. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, while you're on the line, just looking at the proposed modifications that the council has put in their hearing statement, other than Sang, there is, I believe, only one that has, and I think it's come at the request of the county council. I'm not entirely sure about that, consisting of around 3.6 hectares of new employment land as opposed to just 3.6 hectares. I presume that is simply as you don't know if it's exactly going to be 3.6 hectares, and it's simply giving some flexibility, which I think I'm seeing a nod, which comes back to a point that we made previously. I think that unless there is a very specific need that's going to be accommodated, a very specific rationale for having a hard threshold of 3.6 as opposed to say 3.62, I think that's entirely understandable. Is that my understanding of that correct?
Yes, correct, sir.
Okay. I didn't have, I mean, we have a lot of information we're going to hear in terms of Natural England's position, given the various changes in terms of approach to SANGs. I didn't have any further questions on TR01. I'm not sure if Mr. Birkinshaw did.
No, and again, the Natural England point was more, where you are suggesting changes that at plan level they've not seen. So the strategy for this settlement or other settlements is that's the key, and it's sort of flushing out any issues before you would go to say a main modification stage, where you'd have to consult on something and then potentially have to consult on it all over again. That's the importance of it. There was another point I was going to make on that, but it's gone out of my head. HRA as well. You'd have to do an addendum to the HRA to pick that up as well, but nodding there, so that is fine. Anything else, Mr. Bristow, on that site?
No, so it might be prudent to go around, and if you have put your nameplates up previously and no longer need them up, you can turn them on their sides. If you do want to say anything on, I suppose now has come to the point, if you do want to say anything on any of the sites that we have considered that we have not enabled you to say, now would probably be the time. So, Mr. Wallace, I see his flag is up. Okay, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you very much. Just one or 2 points on further. Mr. Criddle from Dacorum Sports Network will be here on Tuesday at the infrastructure hearing, along with myself and Mike Billington here. It's been a bit hard for us to know how much to raise at this hearing and how much to raise as part of infrastructure. But I would like to say that there are many, many other advantages to having that site, part of the site or all of the site or whatever, for sport and open space, other than just more sports fields. There are highway issues, there are footpath cycling issues, there are car parking issues, which is a major problem in Cow Lane in Tring. And they can all be solved with that site.
Thank you. And also you fall to some extent in the same territory as Dr. Eilert, who came to talk about HMO3 and HMO5 yesterday, who's also coming to infrastructure, given that his perspectives on health infrastructure, yours is obviously on sports infrastructure. So we'll continue the debate then. Okay. Yes, Mr. Gunner.
Sorry again, just one small one, and it's probably just a point of clarification, and that's about the Tring fire station relocation, which is listed as something that's going to happen into Dunsley TR1. If it is, then that creates a brownfield site in the centre of Tring. If it's not, then it needs to be taken out of the description of TR1.
Yes, and I did. Sorry, you're entirely right. I did read that in yours or another representation. I suppose it would be useful to get an explanation of that. As I saw it, it was effectively, and this probably goes back to the point, around 3.6 hectares of employment land, potential for relocation, although dependent on other things such as the emergency services kind of long-term strategic plan. So I sort of read it in that context of it depends on what occurs in the future, but you didn't want to prejudice the allocation by not including it. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that is correct. Just to have those options available.
And I suppose you're right that if the fire station does relocate, then it becomes a brownfield site that is subject to requirements. I suppose that's a statement of fact.
Our position is that currently the availability of the site, well, it's not known whether the site will become available or not. The option is there. We've clarified it within the policy that this would be an acceptable use. It's the preferred option of the county council, and we consider that should that site become available, then it could form part of the windfall allowance. And forgive me, I've got another question regarding the HRA addendum, but I don't know if we've finished all of the other points first.
We haven't finished all the other points first. There's a hand rather than a flag up. The flag's lost it, but
Pardon me. A very short point. Appendix B to our hearing statement for this session today is a local resident survey carried out by the Town Council and my clients, and it goes to the TRO1. Both in terms of public popularity, and it goes to the proportionality question we discussed the other day, that the delivery of TRO1 at a suitable level of density gives you the proportionate growth at Tring, along with the windfall allowances and so on. And there's a feedback loop between Appendix B effectively and the proportionality argument I raised the other day.
Thank you. Yes, seen that. The proportionality point again. I think it's. I won't go into it in detail, but I've seen the Grovefield Residents Association has set out the relative proportion that Tring would grow compared to existing number of homes relative to Berkhamsted, relative to the plan as a whole. So we're very much aware of that, which comes back to the spatial approach to development. So very well aware of that. Does the council want to say anything on that? Or are you happy with what you said so far?
Happy with what we said so far.
So I think that leads us on then to your question, which would be about the HRA addendum.
It's if we would be required to prepare that now, once we get the confirmation from Natural England, or if that would then come later.
Yeah, the HRA addendum would accompany your schedule of main modifications. Yeah, I think for this stage, what Mr. Bristow and I need is we need to take away a lot of the representations we've heard so far, and as I said before lunch, actually go and do some pretty detailed site visits around some of the landscape impacts, etc. What would be useful for the examination is just a short, even if it's just email correspondence from Natural England. I'm just trying to flush out any concerns or issues that they might have with regard to your suggested changes. Just trying to avoid any abortive work at a potentially later stage. If they're going to have an objection, we'd rather know now, essentially.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's all from me.
Nothing else anybody wants to say on any of the Tring sites that they've not had the opportunity to do so. Okay. Before we wrap up for the day. Just a very quick sort of housekeeping point. It's more a question for the council, really. We have used the reserve day, which is the 26th, for the site-specific issue around the Sport England and Golf England issues. We know that's happening, and I believe that Louise has kindly emailed the relevant participants on that. It was a point that I want to raise in session, just so you can consider it. And I'll catch you on a bit on the hop here now, but Tuesday 24th, we've got the programme scheduled as in the morning, we've got the Berkhamsted allocations, BK01, 2, 3 and 4. And we've got people coming to that. In the afternoon, we've got London Road and Grange Farm, Bovingdon. I don't believe we've got any participants. It's a question when you take it away and access to is whether or not there's scope to basically two applications on the to tag them onto the Berkhamsted morning, potentially. If there's nobody coming, rather than sort of keeping you all sort of hanging on to 2 o'clock. I mean, Mr. Bristol and I have discussed it, and we've got some quite limited questions on those. So whether we could tag that on. In terms of people coming, there isn't an issue because there are no participants. There's potentially an issue over those sort of people who are sort of wanting to dial in and watch online, maybe. But I don't know whether there's scope for the council to sort of maybe put something on the website, or how I think about it. If it's going to involve it's going to involve more effort than it's worth, is what I'm saying. Don't bother. But equally, it could potentially save an afternoon of sitting time by just tagging those 2 on. That makes sense. No, this is something different. This is just Tuesday 24th. We've got an afternoon session. Yeah, Tuesday 24th is an afternoon session with nobody coming, essentially. And we've got 2 very quite specific questions that could quite easily be tagged on to the end of that Berkhamsted session. So if there's scope to do that, and it might be that we sort of have to put a note on the website or something like that so people know when to tune in, I'm just thinking it could potentially, save an afternoon of sitting time, basically.
Thank you. And I don't know if this is the same on the programs you're looking at. Just one other point. I was going to say I'm looking forward to being here at 10 o'clock on coming Tuesday, 10th of March, when we're talking about the economy and employment. My program, and I may be going off an old version, we're starting at 9:30 on the.
Yeah, this was a point of clarification as well, which might need to take up with Louise. It's just what time is the Tuesday session? Because I think there might have been 2 different programs. I've got it down as 10 o'clock. Mr. Bristow had it down as 9:30. We'll be here anyway, but we just need to clarify that.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think I would go for all Tuesday starting at 10 o'clock, so everyone can get. Okay, but I presume the people 10 o'clock. Yeah. Okay, so 10 o'clock Tuesdays, 9:30 Wednesdays.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And I'm sure everyone that was here for TRO1 to TRO3 was fascinated by that debate. But no, genuinely, thank you everyone for your contributions. It's really, it has really helped us. Thank you for taking the time for being here. We're obviously going to go on site visits, reflect on everything we've heard. But for the time being, with thanks again, we'll adjourn. And as we've just clarified, we'll see some of you at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. Thank you. Let's adjourn.